the week of Chayel. Mr. Shem will have a Farbrengen on Thursday. I hope you guys can attend. It's the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov's Yartzeit, B'Yom Haledes. But now we're learning Kuntres Hechaltzu, and we are chapter 6. That's where we're at. Let's just quickly review in the Kitzer on page 41 of chapter 5. Midyan Menaged L'Sfiras HaChochma. We learned that the clip of Midyan opposes the particular emanation, Sfira, called Chochma, which is loosely translated as wisdom, but the Alter Rebbe has a very different understanding of what Chochma is, which I translate, I like the word creativity. It's the component of mind that creates. And because it's only an idea, it's in creation form, it's the idea of bittul, humility. You don't yet know what the full idea, the full developed idea will lead to. That's only in Bina. So that's what Midyan spiritually opposes. In other words, Midyan opposes bittul. And Midyan is Yeshus. And he's been teaching us that Yeshus, that this ego, arrogance, is the cause of the midas ros, the bad midas. Okay, so that's why Midyan in particular opposes Chochma, the Inyona Bittul Iskalus, whose idea is humility and inclusiveness. The other thing we learned in the previous chapters, Hechaltzu, the Moichin Ikra Bebina, the division between things begins primarily, and you see the word Isser Ikra, primarily. In other words, there is some Hechaltzu even in Chochma, as he discussed at length in the last chapter. We're not going to review that. And I really urge you to read the notes, the English notes in this volume of lessons in Hechaltzu to understand it better. But the primary place where his Hechaltzu begins is in Bina. V'goyremes ha'iskalus. And it ultimately leads to synthesis. And this is a big chiddush, because you would think that the Bina, where we start articulating and analyzing, would lead to a difference. So the Rebbe taught us that if it's healthy Bina, and for it to be healthy Bina, it needs to be guided and fused by Chochma, then the Bina is only an enhancement of the union. The child coming from the mother and the father is an enhancement of the parents, right? They have independence. We hope so. We want that. But the Nekuda is that enhances the parents. So too, although Bina lends itself to division, separation, articulation, so you would think that it contradicts Chochma, which is Nekuda, which is Bittul, humility, which is the creative idea. So the Rebbe explained to us that no, the healthiest type of Nekuda is when it extends itself and is found in variations. So parents, for example, have different types of children. Chayiv Zev just made a shidduch, Mazel Tov, right? That's one child. He has another child, third child. And people have different, and and sometimes you see they're like night and day, the kids, right? Or your own siblings coming from the same parents. So on one hand, you can say, it happens, but it shouldn't be that way. Whatever, it happens. So Darizal already writes, he doesn't bring it here, but Darizal writes that since siblings come from the same branch on the Eitz Chaim, everything is symbolic with the Eitz Chaim in Kabbalah, in the writings of the Arizal, But he says you have different branches sucking and nurturing from the same tree for nurture, for nourishment. And each one wants to outdo the other one. Each one wants more nourishment. Hence, the Arizal, this is from the Arizal, writes that that's why there is sibling rivalry. So you might think that this is, it's jealousy, rivalry. When you learn this Maimah, you understand that that's the ultimate of goodness, is when there is differences and there is rivalry. Just like we say, kinas sofrim tar bechachma. What do Chazal say? The rivalry, the jealousy between the wise people, the chacham, tar bechachma, increases wisdom of Hashem and Torah, right? Or in simple English, competition is very healthy. When they open up another shul nearby that's doing the similar thing to your shul, initially you say, "Oi, you're encroaching on our own property." Well, sorry, chap. According to halacha, there's no for iser in opening a meiser of Torah nearby. Now the question becomes, of course, if it takes away people and children who are donating money, or but even there, what I see by Rabbanim is that there's more leniency in allowing it, because the overall idea is kina sofrim tar b'chochma. Now I want to ask you, when you say kina sofrim, you're using the word kina. Kina means jealousy. The Torah says you shouldn't be jealous. Pirkei Avos we learned is about jealousy, how terrible it is. And here we say kina sofrim. The kina of sofrim is tar b'chochma. It increases chochma, which means it's a good thing. How do the two work together? It should be an oxymoron. And the answer is because it's don't focus on the kina, focus on kinas sofrim. When Yiddish scholars, when true Talmidei Chachamim have kina, it's lishma, or it should be lishma. And that's the same idea over here. When you have the nekuda of chochma, and the nekuda of chochma seeks to express its bittul. I shouldn't say seeks, because that's wrong. If you seek something, you already have a yesh. But the nekudas ha-chochma automatically wants to be experienced, not only in its state of creativity, because you can be the greatest genius with the greatest ideas, and if you don't have someone to take the ingredient, to take the nekuda, to take the idea and to develop it, you're not going to get an atom bomb, if I use that example. It took Mr. Teller in the Manhattan Project to take a nekuda and to develop the nekuda and to do what he did with the nekuda. And there are people who are very strong in that development. So the development process is not antithetical to that nekuda. That development process enhances the nekuda, and the nekuda likes that. And the nekuda says, that's exactly where I want to be. For me to remain in the nekuda state, in the nekuda form, it's only big deal. You're a genius, you have an idea, but what does the world have from it? Nothing. Right? So this is the point that the Rebbe is getting at here, because he says, Hechaltzu, the moichin, the division in the realm of intellect, which primarily finds itself in Bina, goremes iskalulus. It ultimately causes the synthesis, which we're looking for. We're looking for inclusion, togetherness. In simple English, you should be overjoyed. We should be overjoyed when we experience and have connection with others who are so different to us. And that makes the wholesome experience. Someone is doing things like you, so it's like big deal. Okay, it's another clone. It's a clone of yourself. No, that's a chiddush. That's not a chiddush. That's not a novelty. A novelty is when you experience someone that's different, and in the right way, they express truth, but in their way, and the truth that you believe is the truth. So in a spouse, in a relationship, it's the same way. They say opposites attract, right? What's the pshat? What's the meaning opposites attract? That the opposite ultimately completes the other opposite, right? So there's completion in opposites. It doesn't have to always be this way, of course. And I'm not saying everyone should search for a spouse who's opposite themselves. But if min hashamayim, if from heaven, you end up with a spouse, or you end up in a job where there's differences, find ways where the opposite becomes part of the positive experience. The Rebbe told someone, he lives today in Tel Aviv, I know him, a good friend, and he, in the 1969, 1970, in the 70s, he became involved in a non-Hasidic, in the Litvish organization on a very high level. And he was a full Chabadnik. And when the Litvish Rabbonim, and they were prominent Rabbonim, there were still many Rabbonim from Europe alive, but they were Litvaks, in the full sense of the word. And maybe some were even Misnagdim. And they saw this Lubavitcher in their organization, so they said, wow, you guys are unbelievable. I see that the Ufaratsta outreach even reaches our offices in Manhattan. It's like, how do you get here? Right? And he wasn't married at the time. And he just couldn't take it anymore. It started off as a summer job, he told me. And he did well, and they liked him. And, the head, I think Moshe Feinstein, others, whatever. So he wrote to the Rebbe. He told me, he wrote to the Rebbe, and he says, I want out. Because he heard, disparaging, to put it mildly, comments against Chabad, against the Rebbe. And he says, I don't want to be part of it. I can get another job. And the Rebbe told him, stay put. Don't leave. To paraphrase the Rebbe's words, my honor, the Rebbe's honor, and Chabad's honor, you leave for me to deal with. You do what you need to do. You're doing a great job, and it's important for you to be there. Opposite, completely opposite to what he wants. And this is very hard. This is not easy. He's shared over the years with me, different kinds of people come to him and, they want this, they want that. It becomes very difficult. Everyone, so it's difficult. So sometimes the solution is you have to just look the other way, and you have to just ignore it and go on, because you're not equipped, not yet, to deal with the opposition in a way that you could tackle it and handle it. But the ultimate is to do that. Not to ignore, but to incorporate and include and transform. This is what we call in Chassidus Chaim Zev, ishapcha. Not just iskafya. Iskafya means subjugate. Just push aside. Make believe you didn't hear it. Make believe you didn't see it. Ishapcha Isser is taking the problem and somehow transforming and getting them on your side. There's a Maimer, the previous Rebbe of 1944. I remind myself now, tremendous series of Maimer, maybe one day we hopefully can learn it, where he talks about there is an oyev and there is an oyhev. Oyev, the same letters but with a yud, right? What does that mean? The enemy. Ohev with an hey is from the word ava, the love. The Rebbe speaks about two different types of ammunition. One is like a gun or a cannon that shoots far away, and the other is, I'm sorry, one is, he doesn't use that, is a slingshot, like and the other one is a sword. And he explains that the first type is to get the soine harochik, the enemy that is distant from you. There are issues in our character that are distant. They don't haunt us every day. They don't disturb us. Once in a while, they come to bother us. For that type of soine, he says, you have to go a distant type of ammunition. But then the cherev, the sword, is up close. A sword won't be effective unless the person's standing right next to you, right? So the sword is used in direct combat, etc., right? It's karov lecha. It's near you. So he says that the ultimate is to make from the oyev an oyhev. From the enemy, with the yud, an oyhev, a lover. That enemy itself, who hates you, who hated you, the ultimate is to transform them. They should become your lover. They should become your best friend and your closest. It's a shver avoda, there's no question about it. But there are ways, in minute ways and small ways of accomplishing this thing. For most of us, and most of the time, this is not the regular avodah. And when you learn Tanya, and we learn Tanya, we understand that the avodah of a yid, or average yid, is the beinani. What does the Alter Rebbe say about the beinani? The Alter Rebbe says the avodah of the beinani is to reach iskafia. The avodah of the tzaddik is ishapcha. A tzaddik has a neshama that's able to transform. We don't have such a neshama, so generally speaking, that's not our avodah. Although in Perek Yudalad and 14, he says that from time to time you need to do that. That's another explanation, another story. But generally speaking, our avodah is iskafia. So all of this I'm saying because the Rebbe here emphasizes in the Kitzur of chapter 5, Goyremes Iskalus, that the ultimate of the Nekuda is to bring together disparate parts. The koiches ha'atzmiyim goyredes pirut. Then it says there is what we call essential koiches, and essential koiches leads to unity versus koiches, soul powers that are outside of the essence, which I think we're going to talk about more now, and as we learn chapter 6, leads to separation. Let's learn now inside page 42 in the text we're using. Chapter 6. In everything there are opposites. Within the essential soul powers, each one has within itself the opposite of its own koach, its own power. So the Rebbe says here now in introducing a new concept for us, and that is there's something called, okay, so I want you to know this and you have to write it down. There's three things. Four things. Koiches hagiluyim, revealed powers, revealed faculties. Higher than that, more refined, is what we call koiches hanelomim, concealed faculties. God forbid, if someone's under a car, somehow you find the might to lift the car to save the person. That's an example of koiches hanelomim. In other words, you don't walk around with it daily. You know what I'm saying? But when push comes to shove, all of a sudden your koyach goes way beyond the gilui, the way it was revealed and the norm. That's called koiches hanelomim. Then there's a third thing that we're going to learn today. We're learning now, learning soon. There's nefesh noisei koiches. So I'm sorry, it's 5 categories. The soul that, because it's a soul, it has faculties. It's not a faculty yet. You see, in the first 2 stages of koiches hagiluyim and koiches hanelomim, it's already a faculty. A faculty means a certain form. Chesed is not gevura, gevura is not chesed, and chesed is not teferes. In nefesh nosei koiches, that's the name of the third level of nefesh noisei. Noisei literally means it carries, but it's a very bad English translation over here. It means the nefesh gives room for the concept of koiches. That means it doesn't yet have an actual faculty, but the nefesh, in that state of the soul, it says it is proper for there to be faculties. That itself is also a definition, right? As soon as you say the soul gives room for faculties, then that's not the essence of the soul. That means it's the soul as it already sees and understands and relates to some idea of a faculty. And I emphasize idea. Higher, the 4th stage, or you can call it the 2nd stage, or whatever, is koiches atzmiyim. Essential koiches, which basically would mean the nefesh itself, the soul itself. Not the way the soul gives room for koiches. Soul. Here the Rebbe adds, at the beginning, there's something called the atzmus. Shelemayla gam ma'koiches atzmiyim. Wow. I hope you're going to, later on, you got to take time and read the notes here. There's a lot of going on here. But the atzmus, Chassidus, Chabad, and especially the Rebbe Rashab and the Rebbe in his Maimorim, talk about a phenomenon called atzmus. Atzmus comes from the word etzem, essence. But you don't really find this language, by the way, in the Alter Rebbe's in Tanya, and you don't find it in Likutei Torah. You have the beginnings of it in the Mittler Rebbe's Chassidus, but also not much. The Rashab then has it more, and our Rebbe really pours it on. He's like living with atzmus on a daily basis. But I'm talking now about intellectually, and yes, Hillel.
Do you understand that as a kind of progressive revelation?
Oh, for sure. For sure, not a question. It's associated with that we're living in, closer to Mashiach or Mashiach's time, whatever, where it's etzem. But that's for Farbrengen to elaborate upon. Let's talk now about the haskalah, the concepts here, the intellectual concepts here. So atzmus is definitionless, formless. It's etzem. When you say etzem hanefesh, you're talking about the etzem of the nefesh. And when you talk about the etzem of the nefesh, that's also a certain form. Why? Because the nefesh has 5 levels: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechida. Etzem HaNefesh is the essence of the nefesh level. Even Ratzon, which is Chaya, is also, it's not a koach, a faculty that's designated and has a home and abode, right? The mind, the seichel is in the mind. The midos are in the heart. The advice, netzach are in the kidneys, comes from the kidneys, etc., right? Those are all boxes and definitions, and very nice ones and good ones, but they're all defined, and one is not the other. When you talk about nefesh, etzem HaNefesh, you're talking about etzem HaNefesh. So fine, on one hand, you say it's stripped of faculties, of any sort of faculties. And it's even stripped from the concept of a faculty. But it's still etzem hanefesh. Koiches atzmiyim is still, you say the words, koiches atzmiyim, essential faculties. Atzmos doesn't have any word nefesh next to it, doesn't have the word kochos next to it. It's pure as could get. And that's what the Rebbe starts explaining here. Let's go back to the text. So he says, in order to experience the ability to bring opposites together, you have to touch atzmos within yourself. V'hainu mitzado atzmos shelamayla, that transcends gam mehakochos atzmiyim, even the faculty of koichos, of essential koichos. The bi'atzmos, because in atzmos yeshnam kulam b'bchinas iskalvus mamish. You see the word mamish? In atzmos, everything is there, but in a inclusive way, mamish. So in other words, its individuality is not felt and heard. Right? Here's an example. The melech, the king, he has a minister of education and transportation and this and that. The way they are in the mind of the melech, they're all melech. It's all about king. It's not about, there's a king. The king needs education. The king needs transportation. He needs finance. He needs all these things. So the way they are in the king, in the melech, they're there in concept, but they're there from the perspective of the king, the atzmos. Everything lower than that is already, they're there because they have an agenda. They have an agenda. That's the difference. Look further. For example, the etzem hanefesh that transcends also the essential, the koiches. How do we noise be'atzmai? Here we go. See the words noise be'atzmai? I told you that level. It gives place, it carries within itself kol, top of page 44. Kol ha-koiches, all of the faculties. V'shomim b'bchinas eskalos mamish, and over there they're all incorporated. Shari ein shom koiches pratim klal. There are no specific detailed koiches. Af loy kemoy ha-koiches o atzmiyim, not even the way the koiches are in essential state. And he says in the parentheses, shehem bilti mitziris nikeres. There they are non-recognizable as an entity. Says the Rebbe, very nice. When you tell me something is not recognizable, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist in concept. That means you and I don't recognize it. But the idea exists. That's what he says. So even this refined idea of koiches, you cannot say that it exists in atzmos. Nevertheless, simultaneously, we must say that this level of nefesh carries within itself, in concept, all faculties. Because all the koiches, all the faculties come forth. In other words, like this, Chevre, if the nefesh was stripped of koiches, how can faculties come from the soul? This isn't abracadabra. Either there is an idea of koiches in the soul on some level, or they wouldn't exist after. And the fact is they do exist. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, etc., right? What does that mean? That means that in the level of soul, in level of nefesh, there's a concept already of koiches. Just 1 second. Therefore, we must say they do exist there, but they're included, they're incorporated, they're inclusive, they're together. Shekulam ein davar echad mamish ke'inyan yochid. They're all one. Beli shum ischalkus klal, without any division. Ez ischalkus any kind of division. The division part is not felt. Therefore, as the faculties come out in detail, every koyach has the opposite within itself. So you know what this means? You know a person, you know yourself. I'm a cold person, I'm a warm person, I'm this, I'm that. The truth is, we all have a detail of the other one there. Chassidus brings a beautiful raya for this Hillel. A parent, at the time of their child's wedding, especially if it's an only child, the same parent who might be a cold fish is dancing with joy and is ecstatic. Where did it come from? The answer is, he always had it. Yes, sir.
It sounds very much like today's Tanya, the lesson in the Geras HaKodesh, which even somebody whose identity is a gevura, he's got within him, he's got chesed as well.
That's
Abraham, he brings the whole.
Yeah.
Both. It's all together.
Yeah.
It's one.
But right, that's what he's saying here. But what he's adding in this chapter is that specifically, kind of, the more removed you are, the more the differences are healthy, and the more they will be expressed in a healthy way, because they're not differences in the essence. So it's the manifestation, right? The manifestation, and that's why usually either I'm this way or that way. But when you go into etzem, in etzem it's all iskalavus. Okay, we're going to stop here, and tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, we'll go. If I'm asking you again, suggesting again that you really need to read the notes. I mean, if I would read them, it would just take us days and weeks and months. So that's why we have these volumes. But if and when you read them and you have questions, then either ask me during the shiur or better on the WhatsApp, and I'll try to answer. Okay, have a great day, everyone. Zay Matzliach. Welcome back. Chaim Zev, welcome back, and Mazel Tov for your wonderful simcha. Don't hear you. Can't hear him. Okay, it's not working. I'm sure you said Mazel Tov. Zay Gesund. Bye-bye. Take care.